Well, in the end, the criticism changes. And maybe the person waiting for that type of vehicle, when they get something different, whether you like it or not, in the end, it discourages you and maybe you choose another brand. On the other hand, the Chinese are not afraid. The Chinese, if they have money and budget and an idea, they go for it. For example, Neo does it. Craig Wall is not afraid either. And for example, what brand was I going to mention? Yes, one that I don't know if it will disappear, which is Hi-Fi. But their cars look like they came out of Star Wars. Here in Munich at the airport, they had a store. I don't know if it's still there because I haven't been there in a while. But one of the times I passed by, thank you, they had the three cars, or they had them displayed in what you might call a kind of plaza at the Munich airport. And they have them displayed there, the three of them. You start pressing buttons. I started to record videos. Don't you remember that I had started a YouTube channel a while ago? But because of work and family, I haven't been able to dedicate much time to it. But it's true that I recorded a video because I was really amazed, right? And the doors open like gull wing doors. Well, it's like getting into a spaceship. It's true that it's very risky, and perhaps those kinds of risks have led them to the situation they are in, because in the end, they are very expensive cars. I don't know if they were 150,000 euros. So it's difficult for a brand that is not known in Europe to succeed. It needs time to establish itself. And for someone to be willing to spend that kind of money, it already happened to Tesla, although over time they managed it with their Model S to be able to have a market in Europe. But for a Chinese brand with such high prices, entering Europe is difficult. In China, it might be a bit easier, but even so, it's challenging. But they are not afraid. That's how it is. They are not afraid to release any type of vehicle at any price. And if they later have the market, especially in China, because for them, their main market is China, if they can then expand little by little, perfect. For example, Great Wall's main market is China, and then they have a large market in Latin America.
For them, or rather they are not in a hurry. The important thing is their market. Hey, and in terms of design, in terms of timelines, how much time did Volkswagen, a European brand, typically take to design a car compared to a Chinese brand? Because of course, I think the periods are much shorter and more accelerated in Chinese brands, right?
Yes, I think it would be about 6 years.
Normally,
for European brands, about 6 years. Again, from the car at 3 years. You start the facelift, or even at a year and a half, you already start working on the facelift. At 3-4 years, the facelift of the car usually comes out. For example, the Golf, which I was working on, the Golf 8, and 2 years, then it comes out. At 3.5 years, the facelift comes out. And at 6 years, theoretically, the new model should practically come out. And in a Chinese brand, for example, in NEO, which is the most recent experience I've had, when I started at the NEO, which was in January 2022, we started the ET9, right? Yes. And it was presented a few months ago, right? I don't know if it was in July or November when it was presented. So it's been practically 2 years.
I mean, less than half, a third of the time a European brand took.
So it's at a frenetic pace because, for example, at Volkswagen, the presentations were we had a lot of time, more than a month. We had maybe some reviews every 3 weeks, a month. I mean, in terms of design, years until it started. From when the project started in design until it was frozen and then moved to engineering, it was maybe practically 2 years. Not here. Here, everything has to be practically finalized in a year. Here we had reviews practically every week and monthly presentations. So in terms of design, the design was practically finalized in a month, 2 months, and then it would evolve. It started in Class C, Class B, Class A. When it reached Class A, normally all the engineering work was done in China. But yes, sometimes there was feedback. They would comment that these things need to be changed or this doesn't work due to engineering or cost issues. We have to make a different proposal in some details and so on. And in 2 years, the car was practically ready. It's true that, for example, the ET9 was presented a few months ago. Production is going to take a bit longer to release it, but I think practically...
Yes. From the presentation and launch of the ET9, I think it will be about 6 to 7 months. That's more or less the average time NIO usually takes.
Well, one thing, yes, I think that. I think that it will be on the streets by the end of this year.
Yes, at least in China.
Yes, in China. I think that in Europe, I don't think it will come.
It's not clear. On the 15th, we have a NIO Europe event to announce a new product.
Are you coming to Munich?
No, it's being done online. No. Besides, I'll tell you later, because that day I'm in Germany, but for something else. No, okay, I'll tell you later. Today, Arturo, you've been working on it for years. Now you've changed. Working in design for NIO in Europe, what are you allowed to do? Or what do you do? Because a large part of the engineering is done in China. But the design is partly done hand in hand between China and Europe. That's why they say, no, it's a very Chinese design. Well, Arturo is a living example, and I presented in this live podcast that they design and review cars in their exterior part in Europe. What roles do you have when working on the design of a car that will be released in China, but might later be launched in Europe, as you've had experiences with NIO?
Let's see. For example, we at NIO had 4 types. And each team took on a project. But for example, in this one that was so important, we had one team in China and another team here in Munich. Both of us worked together, okay? Each team perhaps had a theme or a part of the car or some proposals. We all made proposals and it was developed jointly. When the car was more or less well matured, then each team then started working on details, made proposals for the grills, the front ends, the lights. So it was done jointly practically. So it's true that NIO Munich